Welcome to the Heroes of Change today, and it's my pleasure to have on the call this morning, this very early morning in Queensland, Mr. Lindsay Adams. Hello, Lindsay.
G'day, Chris. How are you, mate? Great to be here.
So, Lindsay, if I said to change your thinking, change your life, what does that mean to you?
Well, for me, it'd be about looking at things from a different perspective. And over the last, 20-something years that I've been working with people, have spoken with lots of people about change and people. I speak at a conference, for example, and people come to me and they say, "Oh, I want to change. I want to do something different." And it's really interesting that change doesn't happen unless you actually want it to happen. And then I go into organisations. I'm hired as a consultant by by an organisation to create change, and unless the people inside that organisation want to change, nothing's going to happen. One of the most interesting assignments that I did, I was coaching a CEO in a hospital, and he was a very meek and mild character. It was quite interesting. He was the IT manager, and somehow or other he became the CEO. And wasn't a normal kind of transition. And he's a very quiet, shy, introverted, detail man. And he'd been thrown in the deep end. He was surrounded by a very toxic executive. And I was coaching this guy, and he invited me along to a board meeting or an executive meeting one day. And basically the executive were tallying him up. They were just blocking him, opposing him at every minute. And we had a morning tea break in the meeting, and I took him outside and I said to him, "Mate, you need to grow a big set of courage." I'm trying to be polite here. You need to stand up to these people, and you've got to actually be the leader. And what's that old saying? Be the change you want to see in the world. And I love that quote.
Yeah.
And I said, you got to step up. You've got to be the leader. And it took a little time, but this guy eventually grasped a hold of this concept of actually leading the charge, and he took it and he ran hard to the point where, we had identified the director of nursing as being a block in the organisation. And it was early days, and I worked with that organisation for 4 years. It was early days in the process, and I was in America at the annual speakers conference, and I get this phone call, and it's the middle of the night over there, and he says, "I've sacked so-and-so, the director of nursing." And I went, "What?" And basically, yeah, it was the best thing he could have done. And the shift that happened as a result of that, and basically he stood up to this woman and he said, "Enough is enough. It's either my way or the highway." And so sometimes it's the courage to actually step into the shoes that you need to be wearing and start walking in them and get on with it. And, I see a lot of people who are they go through the motions, they turn up and do 9 to 5, and they don't actually take action or positive steps to create the change that really needs to happen.
In your life, perhaps in your speaking journey, with the sort of ups and the downs, what can you think of a phase where you've looked in the mirror and thought, shoot, things have got to change here for me to achieve or grow or influence or, capture my dream?
I was a team leader in audit, and I was participating in a thing called the Audit Management Program. End of day one of a 5-day process. It's 5 o'clock. Facilitator says, "Okay, boys and girls, we're done. Dinner's at 7. See you at the bar. Lindsay, have you got a minute?" And I went over and I said, "How can I help?" And he says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm a team leader in audit. I got a bunch of auditors working for me." He said, "I know that." He said, "Why are you here? You don't fit. You're not like these people. Why are you here?" Now, that question led to a 3-hour conversation with that guy. And he held up a mirror and helped me understand I was in the wrong job. And it's often the people in your life who challenge you, who point out that maybe you could be doing something different. And one of the things I do now, I try to be the guy that holds up the mirror for other people. As a result of that conversation, it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. I left that job. I moved into training and started my HR training career. And here I am 20-something years later, and 18 of which I've been in self-employment. And but for that question, I don't think I would be sitting here today talking to you. And so that I describe it as a catalyst moment in my life. I had this secret desire to be self-employed, but I wasn't ready. And I often talk about this with my clients when I coach them. And I say, when you're ready, you're ready. And I wasn't ready. And so how I became self-employed, I had a coach. In September of 1999, my coach said to me, well, Lindsay, when are you going to get serious? You've been dabbling in speaking, coaching and consulting. When are you going to get serious and do one of them? Anyway, so a week later, I went back to our next meeting and I said, okay, on the 1st of January 2000, I will work permanent part-time. I was working in Brisbane City Council as one of their senior HR people at the time. I will work for them 3 days a week, and I'll work for me 2 days a week. And so on the 1st of January, I did that. And then by March, I knew that it was going to work. And by May, work was getting in the way of my business. And so I handed in my resignation and started full-time on the first available day in the new financial year. And here I am 18 years later, still chugging along. I'm a great believer in making space to create change or allow change to enter your life. And so I actually went through my bookshelf and I cleared out a whole lot of books which I've collected over the last 20 years. And some of them, I looked at the published date and I thought, man, this is, would have been really cutting edge when I read it, but now it's just totally out of date. And then the other thing I found was I had 2 copies of the same book several times over. How about that? Go figure. But anyway, so I cleared out a whole bunch of books and I took them to Lifeline, and Lifeline have an annual book sale here in Brisbane. And I thought, well, who could use these business books? Well, somebody will go to this Lifeline sale and they'll probably pay $1 and take home some great ideas. So it's, in terms of a cycle of change, I've cleared some space and I've opened it up for something good to come in. And I've given a gift to someone. I don't know who that person is, but, someone out there is going to read one of those books and go, aha. And, I won't know that I'm responsible for that change, but I will have created some change somewhere in the world.
What about when we avoid change in our lives, or we procrastinate, or we let our little voice take over? Do you have an approach to working with clients when they're overcoming or resisting change? I mean, the mirror is a great one in coaching, of course.
Sure.
And is there an example in your life where maybe your career changed 20 years ago, where you avoided something, you thought, oh, well, it's safe, I'm paid well, and security. Have you got an approach to procrastination and
Yeah, well, I've just come back from 2 weeks holiday. I landed in Sydney last Thursday morning, and then Friday, Saturday, I had to work in Sydney, and oh man, that was like really hard work. And then I got home, spent a quiet day Sunday, just chilling. And then Monday, so didn't have any appointments Monday deliberately, but tell you what, I had lead boots on. Seriously, I went and sat behind my desk. I think it was probably one of the most unproductive days of my life. I had all these, ideas whizzing around in my head, but nothing happened. And, sometimes it's easy to follow up well, like, a holiday, and then to get started again, it's easy to procrastinate. I spent the day yesterday tidying my office. Now, the office needed tidying, Chris, but what really, guess what? It was just that was another form of procrastination. We're all guilty of procrastination.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I think the difference is what do we do and how do we get out of that?
You're growing up in your family, in your life, was there any figureheads or icons or individuals, be it business, sport, music, who you thought, wow, they're inspirational?
My eldest brother is 14 years older than me. And, when I'm on stage, I often make the joke, so he turns 35 next birthday. Ha, ha, ha. Anyway.
I'm laughing.
Yeah, well, there we go. It works every time. But, he's the guy that I learnt networking from. So he's a keeper in toucherer. That's a word, keeper in toucherer, okay? Or it's a term. I wrote about it in my book. And he keeps in touch with people. Now, he and my mum used to write letters to each other in the days when you wrote letters every single week. Mum would sit down Sunday night at the dining room table. We'd be watching TV and she'd be writing a letter to my brother Neville. And Neville, in return, would write a letter to her. And they exchanged letters for years and years and years. And so Neville's the kind of guy who, once you meet him, you become his friend. He never lets go of that friendship. He stays in touch. Now, he is now 74. I know that's hard to believe. And he's still in touch with his networks. He's retired. He's still in touch with his network of mates from the industry. Relationships underpin everything that we do. Focus in on your relationships and work hard to make them work hard for you.
Is there anything that you go to, Lindsay, as part of your lifestyle choice in the change? When you're embracing change?
I'm a bit of a runner, so when I run, I live in a quite a hilly suburb, and so the track I do 7 kilometres most days, and so there's some really good hills and there's some nice flat bits, and so it's quite an interesting little course, and I describe it as my running meditation. So I can be running and I'm running up a hill. And I kind of go off into a different place, and I get to the top of the hill, and I go, oh, I'm here. I haven't even, instead of focusing on, oh my goodness, this is hard work. Oh, this hill's so steep. Oh, I'm short of breath. I just kind of focus on my steps, and I kind of zone out, if I can call it that, or zone in, maybe. I don't know. In March this year, both my wife and I turned 60. I know that's hard to believe. I look 27. Yeah. But we had a little sit down, a little chat about, well, where to from here? And, looking forward, we're now grandparents. So we want to, I've been traveling a lot, and I want to be around my grandchildren. I just love being granddad. And so we talked about family and, and grandchildren and business. And we made a bit of a 10-year plan. I reckon I'll go until I'm 70, and then we'll reassess. I think I can do what I'm doing quite easily until then. And also, again, thinking about my eldest brother, he was 70 when he finally retired. And, I'm healthy. I look after myself. So I think it's good to stop occasionally and take stock, Where am I now? Where do I want to be? And what have I got to do to make that happen? But I've got a bit of a plan and a vision, and I think I know where I'm going, and I think that's important, that we have somewhere to go. If you don't know what the vision is, then you don't know what to do.
Thank you so much for your time this morning, and really appreciate your wisdom there,